At 11:47 on the first night Ava Caldwell moved into the yellow house next door, she knocked on my door and asked me to lie to her father. She stood under the porch light, with rain shining in her dark hair, one hand wrapped around the sleeve of a gray college sweatshirt. She looked too composed to be frightened, and too frightened to be composed. I had met her only 6 hours earlier, when I carried 2 boxes of books from her aunt's car and learned that she was 27, starting a graduate program in historic preservation, and apparently incapable of labeling a box anything more useful than important. Now she looked at me as if I were the last person on earth she wanted to ask, and the only person she could. "I need you to pretend you love me," she said. For a second, the rain seemed to go quiet. I was 38 years old, divorced, and careful. Careful with money, careful with promises, careful with women who arrived after midnight carrying impossible requests. I had spent 3 years rebuilding a life that looked ordinary from the street. A small architecture practice, a restored brick house in Raleigh, coffee every morning at 6, dinner with my neighbor Diane most Sundays because she insisted no single man could be trusted to eat properly. Ava's request did not belong in that life. So naturally, I opened the door wider. Before I tell you how one reckless lie changed both of our lives, take a second to like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, could you pretend to love someone without risking the real thing? Ava stepped inside, but stayed near the entry rug, dripping onto the hardwood. I handed her a towel. She pressed it to her hair without taking her eyes off me. "My father is coming Saturday," she said. "He thinks you're my boyfriend." I waited for the explanation to improve. It did not. Why would he think that? Because I told him, "You told your father you were dating a man you had never met?" I had seen a picture. That is not the defense you think it is. A reluctant smile touched her mouth, then vanished. "My aunt sends family photos. You were in one from Thanksgiving. You were holding a pie. Excellent. Nothing says long-term romantic stability like a man holding pecan pie." She exhaled, and for the first time some of the tension left her shoulders. I know how this sounds. It sounds like a reason to lock my door earlier. I panicked. That word was honest enough to change the room. She explained that her father, Richard Caldwell, owned Caldwell Urban Development in Richmond. Ava had worked for him for 4 years after college, first because she believed in the company, and later because leaving became harder than staying. She had been engaged to Mason Trent, her father's vice president of acquisitions, until 3 months earlier. When she ended the engagement and accepted a graduate fellowship in Raleigh, her father called it a breakdown. He told her she was throwing away a secure future because she was embarrassed about a wedding that had not happened. During their last argument, he said she would be lonely, broke, and back in Richmond by Christmas. So she told him she was not lonely. She said there was someone in Raleigh, someone steady, someone her aunt trusted. Then, because Diane had spent years praising the neighbor who fixed her porch rail and brought soup when she had pneumonia, Ava said my name. "I thought he'd drop it," she finished. "Instead, he said he wanted to meet you. And you let the lie survive all the way to Raleigh. I kept thinking I would find a way out. You found one. Tell him the truth." Her gaze lowered to the towel in her hands. "If I tell him now, he'll say this proves I'm unstable. My grandmother left an education trust. My father controls the distributions until I'm 30. Tuition is due Monday." There it was. Not a helpless woman asking to be saved, but an intelligent woman trapped inside a mistake with a deadline. I knew something about performing love. My ex-wife, Lauren, once asked me to smile through an investor dinner while our marriage was ending. We played devotion for a contract, and by dessert, I felt like a prop in my own life. "I don't perform relationships," I said. Ava nodded immediately, which made refusing her harder. "You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come." She handed back the towel and reached for the door. "What exactly happened Saturday?" I asked. She stopped. "One dinner. My father and Mason are driving down. Aunt Diane invited them before she knew what I'd said. I need them to believe we've been seeing each other quietly for a few months. After tuition clears, I'll tell my father we ended things. So your plan is to solve one lie with another lie, followed by a third lie. When you say it like that, it sounds flawed." "It is flawed. I can pay you." I stared at her. She closed her eyes. That was insulting. "Forget I said it." "I'm trying." The rain struck the windows harder. Across the street, a transformer flashed blue, and the lights went out. Ava flinched. My emergency lamp clicked on a second later, filling the hallway with a low amber glow. "You all right?" I asked. "Yes." Her answer came too fast. A branch scraped the roof. She glanced toward the dark window. "Storms? Not usually." I waited. She looked annoyed with herself. Mason used to drive when he was angry, too fast. One night in a storm, Never mind. It's not relevant. It was relevant, but I did not press. Instead, I lit 2 candles in the kitchen and put water on the gas stove for tea. Ava sat at the end of the table, still wrapped in my towel, while I checked the outage map on my phone. "Your aunt's power is out too," I said. "She has a battery lantern in the hall closet. I'll walk you back." "You don't have to." I know. She watched me set a mug in front of her. "Why are you being kind after saying no?" "Because those are separate decisions." That answer seemed to land somewhere deeper than I intended. She looked down at the steam rising from the tea. "My father thinks kindness is a negotiation," she said. "Mason thinks it's a debt." "And what do you think?" "I'm trying to remember." The storm passed within an hour. I walked her next door with a flashlight, found Diane asleep through the entire outage, and made sure Ava's bedroom window was latched. At the top of the stairs, she turned toward me. "I won't ask again," she said. "And I won't use your name again. I'm sorry, Daniel. It was the first time she said my name. I should have gone home and forgotten the whole conversation." Instead, I stood in my dark kitchen at 1 a.m, remembering the way she had said kindness without debt, and wondering what kind of man would make a woman afraid of a storm. By breakfast, I had not changed my mind. I had only built a list of reasons why changing it would be a terrible idea. Diane ruined that list before 9. She appeared on my back patio in gardening gloves and a robe patterned with blue herons. "You met Ava. That sounds less like a question and more like an accusation. She told me what she did." "Good. Then you can help her tell her father the truth." Diane pulled off one glove with her teeth. "Richard doesn't hear truth. He hears leverage. He's still her father. He is also the man who called her fellowship a childish hobby." I poured coffee into a second mug because Diane never left without one. That does not make the fake boyfriend plan less ridiculous. No, it makes the reason behind it less ridiculous. She took the mug and leaned against the counter. Diane had been my neighbor for 7 years. She had watched me move in with Lauren, watched us renovate, watched Lauren leave, and never once offered an opinion until I asked. That restraint made her current expression dangerous. Ava was always the brave one, she said. At 10, she stood between her little brother and a dog twice her size. At 16, she told Richard his company was tearing down buildings people could still use. Somewhere along the way, she learned that bravery had to be approved by a man first. She lied about me. Yes. You're supposed to defend her. I'm too old to defend foolishness. I'm asking whether one foolish choice should cost her the chance to build a life. I looked through the window toward the yellow house. Ava was in the side yard, carrying flattened boxes to the recycling bin. Her hair was tied up. She wore old jeans and moved with the determined efficiency of someone who did not want to be caught needing help. "One dinner," I said. Diane smiled into her coffee. "I have conditions." "Of course you do. No money. No dramatic public affection. No invented stories we can't remember. We tell as little as possible." After tuition clears, she tells him the relationship ended, and my name disappears from the Caldwell family forever. Diane's smile softened. "You should tell Ava yourself." Ava did not celebrate when I gave her the answer. She studied me across Diane's kitchen table, as though searching for the part of the deal that would eventually be used against her. "You're sure?" she asked. "No, that's reassuring. It's honest." She nodded. "What are your conditions?" I listed them. When I finished, she added one of her own. "If either of us becomes uncomfortable, we stop, even at dinner." "Agreed. And I won't let my father insult you. I can survive a rich man's disappointment." Her eyes sharpened. "That's not the same as saying you should have to. It was a small thing, but it surprised me. Most people who needed something from me became very skilled at explaining what I could endure." Ava was already thinking about what I should not have to. Diane clapped her hands once. "Wonderful. Now you need a believable history." "No," Ava and I said together. Diane ignored us. "Where did you meet?" "We don't need that much detail," I said. "My brother once asked a waiter where the olives were grown." Ava groaned. "He did. For the next hour, we built the least romantic romance in North Carolina." We had supposedly met in April at a preservation lecture Diane dragged me to. We had coffee afterward. We kept things quiet because Ava was ending her engagement, and I valued privacy. We liked old houses, strong coffee, and walking through neighborhoods where people had planted trees before either of us was born. Some of those details were invented. Others were true enough to make me uneasy. "What was our first argument?" Ava asked. "We haven't had one. No one will believe that." "Fine. You wanted to paint original brick." "I would never paint original brick." "Now I believe we're in love." She laughed, and the sound changed her face. Until then, I had noticed that she was attractive in the distant, responsible way a man notices a flame near dry paper. When she laughed, distance became harder. We spent Friday preparing for a dinner that should never have required preparation. I showed her my office because her father knew I was an architect. She asked intelligent questions about a community library project pinned to the wall. I learned that her graduate research focused on converting abandoned commercial buildings into affordable housing without erasing the history of the neighborhoods around them. "My father says preservation is sentimental," she said, tracing the edge of a site plan without touching it. "He thinks the past only matters if it raises property value." "What do you think?" "I think people deserve to recognize the place where they built their lives." That answer stayed with me. Later, we walked to a coffee shop near campus so we could be seen together in the kind of ordinary setting couples occupied. I told myself the practice was practical. Then Ava reached across the table and wiped a streak of graphite from the side of my hand with her thumb. "You draw while you talk," she said. I looked at the place she had touched. Occupational hazard. Her hand retreated. "Sorry. You don't need to apologize for everything. I'm not apologizing for everything. You apologized to the barista because the shop ran out of oat milk." She looked stressed. "You also apologized to a chair when you bumped into it. That chair came out of nowhere." I smiled despite myself. On the walk home, she asked about my divorce. Not with curiosity, but because her father might. Lauren and I built a firm together, I said. Then we learned we wanted different lives. She wanted expansion, travel, investors, bigger projects. I wanted work I could recognize when it was finished. Which one of you was wrong? Neither. That was the problem. Ava considered that. Mason and I wanted different lives too. He just kept insisting mine would change. Did you love him? She looked straight ahead. I loved the person I thought I could be beside him. Calm, certain, approved of. It was the saddest definition of love I had ever heard. Saturday arrived with clear skies and the polished tension of a staged photograph. Diane roasted chicken. Ava wore a dark green dress and no jewelry except a thin silver watch. I put on a jacket and tried not to notice how often she pressed her thumb against the watch band. At 5:30, a black sedan stopped in front of the yellow house. Richard Caldwell stepped out first. He was 60, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and so precisely dressed that even the humidity seemed unwilling to touch him. Mason came around the passenger side. He was closer to my age, handsome in the practiced way of men who had learned which expression photographed well. Ava's hand found mine before they reached the porch. It was part of the performance. I knew that. Her fingers were cold anyway. Richard greeted Diane, kissed Ava's cheek, and looked at me as if reviewing a proposal he already intended to reject. Daniel Mercer. Richard. His gaze dropped to our joined hands. I've heard surprisingly little about you. Ava's grip tightened. I said, that was partly my choice. I prefer knowing what something is before explaining it to other people. Mason smiled without warmth. And what is it? I looked at Ava. She met my eyes, waiting. Important, I said. The word was not in our script. Something flickered across her face before she turned toward the door. Dinner began with polite conversation and became an interrogation before the salad plates were cleared. Richard asked where we met, what projects I had underway, whether I intended to remain in Raleigh, how often I traveled, and whether I had children. He asked each question calmly, as if calmness could turn invasion into courtesy. Ava tried to redirect him twice. He ignored her twice. Finally, he said, "You understand my concern. My daughter has made several abrupt decisions recently." Ava set down her fork. Ending an engagement I didn't want was not abrupt. It took me a year. Mason's jaw shifted. Richard continued as if she had not spoken. Graduate school, relocation, a relationship no one knew existed. I knew, Diane said. He glanced at her. You know what people tell you? I felt Ava's hand move beneath the table, not toward mine, but into her lap. She was withdrawing by inches. I had promised not to turn dinner into a confrontation. I had also promised myself I would not become a prop again. So I answered the question Richard had not asked. Ava is not confused, I said. She is changing direction. Those are different things. Richard's expression remained pleasant. You've known her, 4 months? Long enough to know she works harder than anyone in the room wants to admit. Mason leaned back. That sounds romantic. It wasn't meant for you. Diane hid a smile behind her wine glass. Ava looked at me then. Not gratefully. Gratitude would have made the moment simpler. She looked startled, almost hurt, as if being defended without first being asked for payment was more dangerous than being criticized. Richard changed tactics. Ava tells me you share an interest in adaptive reuse. We do. Then perhaps you can explain why she needs a degree to pursue something she could do inside my company, because inside your company she would still need your permission. Silence settled over the table. Ava's knee touched mine. This time she did not pull away. Richard smiled faintly. You're very certain for a man involved in a temporary experiment. The phrase was meant to wound both of us. Ava answered before I could. Daniel is not an experiment. Mason looked between us. Then tell us how he takes his coffee. Ava blinked. It was a petty question, but petty questions expose large lies. We had never discussed it. She could have guessed. Instead, she said, black in the morning, 1 sugar after dinner, even though he claims dessert should be enough. Everyone turned to me. That was exactly right. I had never told her. She had noticed. I looked at her silver watch, at the way she twisted the band when she was anxious, and understood that I had noticed things too. She leaves cabinet doors open, I said. She reads plaques out loud. She pretends she doesn't like cinnamon, then steals the center of Diane's rolls, and when she is trying not to cry, she asks practical questions. Ava went still. No one at the table spoke for several seconds. Then Diane rose to clear the plates and said, well, I believe we've all earned dessert. The rest of dinner was less aggressive, though not kinder. Richard confirmed that the tuition distribution would be released Monday. Mason said little. When they finally left, he paused beside Ava on the porch. You don't have to prove anything this way, he said quietly. Her shoulders stiffened. I'm not proving anything to you. His gaze moved to me. Be careful. She mistakes escape for love. Ava's face drained of color. I stepped between them without touching either one. Good night, Mason. He held my gaze, then walked to the car. After the sedan disappeared, Diane began gathering glasses with the urgency of a woman who knew 2 people needed privacy and intended to pretend otherwise. Ava went into the backyard. I found her beneath the old magnolia tree, arms folded tightly against herself. You all right? I asked. She laughed once, without humor. You keep asking me that like one day I might answer correctly. There isn't a correct answer. She looked toward the dark fence. Mason said that before. About escape. When I ended the engagement, he told me I didn't want a different life. I only wanted the feeling of running toward one. Do you believe him? I'm afraid he might be right. I moved beside her, leaving enough distance that she could choose whether to close it. Then don't decide tonight, I said. Go to class Monday. Do the work. Build a life one ordinary day at a time. Escape is about what's behind you. A life is about what you keep choosing when no one is watching. She turned to me. The porch light caught the shine in her eyes. Was any of that real in there? She asked. I knew exactly what she meant. The coffee? The way you looked at me. A safer man would have lied. Yes, I said. Her breath changed. So did mine. For one suspended second, the space between us felt less like distance and more like a decision. Then Diane opened the back door and called, Ava, your father left his scarf. The moment broke. Ava stepped away first. We should finish the plan. The plan is finished. Right. She nodded. Of course. But as she walked inside, she touched 2 fingers to the silver watch at her wrist. And I understood that the lie had ended at dinner. The danger was that something else had begun. On Monday morning, Ava's tuition cleared. She texted, "It worked," followed a minute later by, "Coffee? Not fake coffee. Thank you, coffee." I met her near campus. She had 3 books beside her and a yellow pencil behind one ear. She pushed a black coffee toward me and said, "It's still morning enough." When I reminded her she owed me nothing, she smiled. I know. That's why I wanted to. The following Saturday, I took her through the abandoned textile warehouse my firm hoped to turn into a public market. She moved through the broken rooms as if they were speaking. She found workers' initials beneath a stair rail and union dates painted on a wall my plan would have cut through. "This place remembers being useful," she said. I revised the entrance on Monday. It was the first time she changed one of my buildings, though not the last. By Wednesday, she had become part of my routine without either of us naming it. She borrowed my drafting table for a project. I ate dinner at Diane's more often. Ava left cabinet doors open in my kitchen and denied it while standing beneath one. We argued about whether modern additions should imitate old structures. She said imitation made buildings dishonest. I said contrast could become arrogance. Neither of us won, which made the argument last for days. The fake relationship gave us permission to notice each other. Its ending gave us no permission at all. That should have made things clearer. Instead, it made every ordinary moment feel charged. One evening, I found her asleep over tracing paper at my dining table. I covered her with a blanket, and she woke asking whether she had missed dinner. "You missed consciousness," I said, setting out the soup I had ordered. She watched me work. "You're good at caring for people when you think they won't notice." Then, more softly, she asked whether my former wife had noticed. I told her Lauren had needed a larger, faster life, and that devotion could not make two directions become one. "That's what frightens me," Ava said, "that two people can tell the truth and still lose each other. The truth at least gives them a chance not to." When I touched her hand, she turned her palm into mine. We stayed that way until the soup went cold, saying nothing that could be taken back. 2 days later, Richard Caldwell arrived at my office without an appointment. He placed plans for a 3-block Richmond redevelopment on my desk and offered my small firm a partnership that could have doubled its size. The old municipal market sat inside the demolition boundary. When I pointed that out, he said everything had a price. Then he warned me that Ava was in transition and might confuse validation with permanence. "You came to buy my cooperation and warn me away from your daughter," I said. "I came to stop rebellion from becoming romance." I pushed the folder back. "Take the project." At the door, he said Ava would eventually blame me for the future she gave up. After he left, I stood among drawings of buildings people wanted to save and wondered whether staying close to her was another way of asking her to choose against her family. I told her about the visit that evening. She listened without interrupting, her face growing still in the way I had learned meant anger, not calm. "He offered you the Richmond project?" "Yes." "And you refused before telling me." "It was my project to refuse." "Did he mention my trust?" "No. He will." She paced once across my living room. "He'll threaten the next distribution, or he'll call the fellowship committee, or he'll remind me that my brother still works for him. He never pushes one door when there are 6 windows." Then we tell Diane. We document everything. She stopped. "We?" The word carried hope and fear in equal measure. "If you want me involved," I said, "I do." Her answer was immediate. Then she looked away. "That's the problem." I stepped closer. "Why?" "Because every time you stand beside me, it becomes harder to know whether I'm choosing this life for myself or because I want the version of me you seem to see. That is not something I can decide for you." "I know. What can I do?" She pressed her fingers to her watch band. "Don't rescue me. I wasn't planning to." "Good. I was planning to make sure you knew you weren't alone." Her expression broke then, just slightly. She crossed the distance between us and kissed me. It was not a desperate kiss, or a grateful one. It was careful at first, a question asked without surrender. I touched her face, giving her time to move away. She did not. When the kiss deepened, it felt less like the beginning of something than the honest naming of something that had been growing between us for weeks. When we separated, her forehead rested against mine. "That was not fake," she whispered. "No." Good. Then she stepped back, breathing unevenly. But I still need to solve this myself. I know. I'm not asking you to wait. I know that too. Her eyes searched mine. You say that very calmly. I'm trying not to ruin the moment by admitting I have no idea what happens next. She laughed softly. That makes two of us. What happened next was not a relationship, at least not one we named. We kissed again, worked together at the warehouse, and learned each other's habits. The intimacy lived in coffee beside a tired hand, honest criticism, and the things I began telling her before I could arrange them into safe sentences. For 3 weeks, we lived in the space between choice and declaration. Then her father froze the trust. The email arrived during her midterm review. The trustee had been instructed to suspend all future distributions pending verification of academic necessity and beneficiary stability. The fellowship covered part of her tuition, but not rent, insurance, or the spring term balance. Ava did not call me. She called the University Financial Aid Office, her program director, and an attorney recommended by Diane. By the time she told me, she had already applied for 2 research assistantships and picked up weekend work cataloging materials for the city archives. I can cover the difference, I said. No, it could be a loan. No, you don't even know the amount. It does not matter. We were standing in my kitchen, the same room where she had once offered to pay me to pretend. Now the balance of need had shifted, and she would not let it become a debt. I'm not your father, I said. I know. That is why I need to be able to say no to you and have it remain safe. The words stopped me. All right, I said. Her shoulders lowered. Thank you. But you don't get to disappear while you solve it. I wasn't planning to. You ignored my call this morning. I was in a meeting. And last night? She looked at the floor. Ava. I'm ashamed. Of what? That part of me knew he would do this. I still used his money. I still built my escape on a door he could lock. You used a trust your grandmother created for your education. He controlled it. That is his choice, not your shame. She looked up, angry tears in her eyes. Please don't make every hard thing sound survivable. I understood too late that encouragement can become pressure when someone is exhausted. I'm sorry, I said. What do you need tonight? She took a breath, for it to be hard without becoming a lesson. So we sat on the kitchen floor with our backs against the cabinets. I did not offer a solution. I did not tell her she was strong. I let the silence be heavy. After a while, she leaned her head against my shoulder. That night taught me more about loving her than the kiss had. A week later, Ava was offered a paid research position on a preservation survey in Charleston. It would cover her spring tuition and living expenses, but she would need to leave Raleigh for 4 months, beginning in January. She brought the letter to my office. This is good, I said. It is. You should take it. Her face changed. I heard my own words as she heard them. Quick, reasonable, relieved. I mean, it solves the funding problem, I added. And the project is exactly your field. Yes, it's 4 months, not forever. I know. But she folded the letter with too much care. What aren't you saying? I asked. She looked at me for a long time. Nothing you haven't already answered. Ava. I have class. She left before I could stop her. That evening, Diane came over carrying a casserole and disappointment. What did you say? She asked. I told Ava to take a good job. You told her quickly, I assume? It is a good job. That was not my question. I set the casserole on the counter. She said she needed to make her own decisions. She did. That does not mean she needed you to become emotionally neutral. I'm not neutral. Then why are you working so hard to sound like it? Because Richard's warning had found the exact fracture in me. Because I remembered Lauren saying I made contentment sound like a moral virtue, when it was only the life I preferred. Because I was terrified Ava would stay, lose an opportunity, and one day look at me as the smaller life she had chosen. I said none of that. Diane studied my silence. Daniel, there is a difference between refusing to control someone and refusing to tell them they matter. The next morning I went to find Ava. Her aunt's guest room was half-packed. She accepted Charleston, Diane said from the doorway. She leaves after finals. Where is she? Campus. Final studio presentation. I drove there with every speech I might give collapsing under the weight of how late it was. The review room was open to visitors. I stood in the back while Ava presented her proposal for an abandoned neighborhood school. Her boards showed classrooms converted into apartments, the gym preserved as a community hall, the old library reopened to the street. She spoke clearly, without apology. Adaptive reuse is not the refusal to let go, she told the panel. It is the decision to keep what still has life in it, while changing what no longer serves the people inside. The sentence went through me like a door opening. I had spent 3 years calling my caution wisdom. Some of it was fear, with excellent manners. After the presentation, students crowded around her. I waited in the hallway until she came out carrying a model in both hands. She stopped when she saw me. You were good, I said. Thank you. I was wrong. Her grip tightened on the model. About the project? About acting like your leaving would not affect me. People moved around us, but the hallway felt private. I want you to take the position if it is right for you, I said. I also want you to know I hate the thought of 4 months without you. Both things are true. Her eyes shone, but she did not rescue me from the rest. I was afraid that if I asked you to stay, I would become another man defining your future. So I said the opposite of what I felt and called it respect. What did you feel? I felt like I was losing you. You never said you had me. She was right. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. I love you, Ava. The words were not dramatic when they came. They were steady. That made them more frightening. I love the way you see history as something people live inside. I love that you notice how I take coffee, and when Diane pretends her knee doesn't hurt. I love that you say no and expect it to be safe. I love you enough to want the truth, even if the truth takes you to Charleston. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away with the heel of her hand. I love you too, she said, but I still have to go, I know. And I don't want 4 months of promises we make because we're scared. Then we make one promise. What? We don't pretend. Her mouth trembled into a smile. You were never very good at it. I fooled your father. No, you didn't. He knew by dessert. What? He told Diane later. He said nobody who had been dating me for months would look that surprised when I knew his coffee. Despite everything, I laughed. Ava set the model carefully on a bench. Then she put both hands around my face and kissed me in the middle of the architecture building, with students passing and professors pretending not to watch. This time, neither of us called it anything but real. The final confrontation with her father happened 2 days before she left. Richard came to Diane's house expecting Ava to sign paperwork restoring the trust under new conditions. She invited me to be there, not to speak for her, but because she wanted someone beside her who would not turn support into control. Richard placed the documents on the dining table. The spring distribution will be released if you withdraw from the Charleston position, return to Richmond after the semester, and agree to a financial advisor approved by the trust. Ava read every page. Then she pushed the papers back. No. Richard looked at her, as if the word belonged to a language he had never needed to learn. You cannot fund this indefinitely. I don't have to. I accepted the research position. The university converted my fellowship to a full assistantship for next year. You would choose temporary work over your inheritance? I'm choosing the right to fail without owing you obedience. His gaze shifted to me. And him? Ava did not look at me before answering. I choose him, too. Not instead of my work. Not because he saved me. Because he stands beside me without asking me to become smaller. Richard's face tightened. For a moment, I saw not a villain, but a father who had confused providing with owning, and who now had no language for love without authority. You will regret making permanent decisions in an emotional state, he said. Ava touched the silver watch on her wrist, then unfastened it. Mason gave me this the night we got engaged, she said. He said it would remind me that timing was everything. She placed it on top of the papers. He was wrong. Choice is everything. Richard left without the documents being signed. Ava cried afterward. Freedom did not make losing her father painless. I held her while Diane sat on the other side, one hand resting on Ava's back. No one told her she had won. Some victories are simply the first honest grief. She left for Charleston in January. We made no grand promises. We scheduled calls, traded weekend visits, argued, failed, and learned. Distance exposed every habit we could ignore in the same room, but it also taught us to apologize without turning apology into surrender. 4 months later, I waited for her at the Raleigh station. When she stepped onto the platform, she was carrying the same battered suitcase she had brought to Diane's house. Her hair was shorter. Her smile was not. I took the suitcase from her. Careful, she said. It's labeled important, still useless. It contains my entire future. Then you packed badly. She laughed and wrapped her arms around me. A year after the night she knocked on my door, the old textile warehouse opened as a public market. Ava's research had helped us preserve the Union Wall and create an exhibit around it. At the opening, Diane cried. My staff pretended not to, and Ava stood beside me beneath the restored windows as afternoon light filled the room. She had moved into her own apartment by then, 3 blocks away. That mattered to her. She wanted a home she had chosen and paid for herself before we chose one together. I understood. Late that evening, after the speeches and photographs, we walked back to my house. Rain began halfway there, warm and sudden. By the time we reached my porch, we were soaked. Ava stood beneath the same light where she had stood on her first night in Raleigh. I need to ask you something, she said. I leaned against the doorframe. That sentence has a troubling history. She smiled. I need you to pretend you love me. I looked at her for a moment, at the woman who had once borrowed my name because she believed courage required evidence. Now she had built a life with her own hands and invited me into it freely. I can't, I said. Her smile faded just enough to play along. Why not? Because I stopped pretending the first night. She kissed me in the rain. Later, people asked when our relationship began. Ava said it was when I refused her money. I said it was when she knew my coffee. Diane still claimed credit because of the Thanksgiving photograph. The truth was simpler. Love began in repeated choices. To open a door, listen without fixing, leave without abandoning, and return without demanding that nothing had changed. Every summer, when rain struck the porch roof, Ava knocked instead of using her key. Can you pretend? She would ask. No, I would say, pulling her inside. But I can spend the rest of my life telling you the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous lie is the one that reveals what we have been too afraid to want. If this story made you think of a choice you once postponed, share it in the comments. And remember, Real love never asks you to become smaller to make someone else feel secure.